We are live, so please let me know if you can both see and hear me okay. That would be helpful. Thanks as always to our moderators that are on there. And I don't know if Susan needs to do anything. J. Scott McLean says it's 5 by 5, so looks like we've got at least one good report so far. So let me know if you can see and hear me okay, and that would be much appreciated. Awesome. Hi, Aston. Daniel from Germany. Sandrine from France. Good afternoon. Morning here in Idaho. We had some rain last night, still a little cloudy. Not that you're super concerned about that, but just a quick weather report here from southern Idaho. It's been a pretty mild winter, other than we had like a couple weeks of really cold and snow, but pretty mild otherwise. Bart Cat from Florida. Katie from Oregon. Annie from Portugal. Steve from Grand Prairie, Texas. Okay, so Susan needs me to do... All right, Susan, give me a second to figure all that out again. Yeah, the Nightbot thing is maybe helpful, but a bit of a pain, if I'm being honest. So, not watching the live chat right now. I've got to do a little bit of work here for Susan. And I got to first find the whole Nightbot thing. Let's see here. That's not the right page. I should have kept the page you sent me, Susan. I got to rifle through my email a bit. Is that the right one? Let's try this one. So if you're joining us and I'm just talking to myself, apologize. Let's see. Just setting up some things here for our moderators. Susan, if you could, sorry to be a pain, but if you could email me the right link again. I'm having trouble finding. Oh, there we go. Oh, is it working? Oh, okay, so it's all good. Thank you for letting me know. All right, so got that figured out. Sounds like there's just a little lag time and then it joins in. So excellent. So if you're joining us a little early, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, or good night, as the case may be. We're about 10 minutes out from our official start, so this is just sort of the time to jump on and chit chat with folks if you want to on the live chat. You're welcome to let us know that you're on and where you're from. I'll try to get to as many as I can with a quick shout out. Dan Cooper's here, Stephen from Georgia, Christian from Chicago, Liga from Latvia, Mitch from, Mantlewind from Scotland, Brandy from Boise, Paul from Angola, Sarah Watts from Birmingham, UK, Gail from Georgia. Greetings, everyone. Kimball from Kansas City. Luis just got back from Iceland. That's awesome. Super jealous. Britta from Denmark, or Germany near Denmark. Alan from Kent, UK. If you have questions, I think Amanda Joe, who goes by Mandy Joe on the live chat, might be handling those, and she has directions on how she wants that done. So you can funnel those towards her, and we'll get to the questions at the end of the live stream. Jeremy from Vermont, Una from Rawi from Ireland, Debbie from Scotland, Mal from Scotland, JS from OKC, Dawn from Los Angeles, Carol from Salem, Oregon, Penny from northeast of UK, Rick from the Netherlands, Rachel from Central Texas, Jeffrey from the Netherlands. Appreciate all of you spending time with me here today. So awesome we have so many folks here. Rick from Washington, Sam from North Yorkshire, Poppy from Cornwall, Lorna from Bryan, Texas, Let's see, Linda from Edmonton, where it's trying to snow. I'm sure it will be successful. Canada's known for that. Barbara from Parker, Colorado. Oh, it just skipped on me again. Let's see, what do we got here? Anna from Finland. Sybil from Germany. Patsy from Michigan. Margaret from the Netherlands. Chris from Germany. Lee Rotler from Tucson. Janine from Virginia. Y.R. Yer from Australia. Stig from Sweden. Terry from Waverly, Tennessee. Chuck from Southern Illinois. Jane from Ohio. Deb and Loki from Canada. Cold and sunny in Massachusetts, says Jean. Terrence from Kingston, Ontario. Bruce from London. Mr. Muppet Fan, Australia. I'll give a couple more shout outs here. I enjoy doing it. Some of you might get a little annoyed with it, but I just want people to feel like they're part of the team here. That's how we roll. Oh boy, now I lost my place. There's a lot of folks on here, which is great. I probably lost track, so I might have skipped some folks. Marty from Germany. Terry. Oh, I don't see where Terry's from. Janet from San Angelo, Texas. Matthew from Detroit. Susan from Ontario, Canada. Virgil from snowy Billings, Montana. Yeah, we got a little storm that's rolling through the Pacific Northwest and Rocky Mountain states. KD, a geophysicist from Germany. Greetings. Walter from the Netherlands. Wolfgang from Germany. Scotty from Isle of Man. Mina from Finland. Debbie from Western Pennsylvania. Thomas, Denmark. I got to pick up the pace here if I'm going to get them all. Marco from Sweden. Mabodi Fiamma. That's cool. Italy. Awesome. Gary from Oregon Coast. Thorsten from Germany. If I mispronounce your name or where you're from, I greatly apologize. Hallie or Haley from Germany. Walt from Medina, Ohio. Terry from Bainbridge Island, Washington. My dad lives near in Oak Harbor, so he's right there near you. S. Nichols from South Carolina. Michelle from St. Louis. Drain, Oregon. Rick from Vancouver. Lise from Denmark. Peter from Sweden. Awesome. So many folks here. Michael from Coeur d'Alene. Michael from the UK. We've got Jonathan from Vegas. DeWiz from Ottawa, Canada. J. Scott McLean from Washington. John from Tallahassee. It's just fun to see where people are from. Ireland, Australia, Central Wisconsin, Farmer Mark, Kansas, Miriam from Davis, Andrew from Fairbanks, Alaska. Carol on the road in the UK, watching live. Watch the road, Carol. Don't watch the live stream. So if you're actually driving, but if you're like someone else is driving, that's okay. Ari from the cold Netherlands. Lloyd from North Carolina. Trent from completely tectonically boring Minnesota. Come on, Trent. There's cool rocks in Minnesota. Get excited about it. But tectonically, yeah, you're right. It's kind of boring. John from Western Australia. Eric from Vancouver, BC, I suppose. Kate, Hudson Valley, New York, and lots of folks there. I'm like, I guess I'm not too far behind. Bill from St. George, Chris from Denver, Pascal from the Netherlands, Matt from Hanover, Indiana, Colin from Quebec, Chris from Scotland, Denny's from South Africa, Dave from Helena, Montana, Linda from Loveland, Colorado. So cool. So let's see what continents we've got. Europe for sure. We've seen Australia. Do we have anyone from Asia, I wonder? If anyone is watching this from somewhere in Asia or Africa. Sometimes we get South American folks. I haven't seen those three continents represented. So, but we'll see. Kind of fun. Yeah, if you can make sure you hit the little thumbs up button, the like button, that's always greatly appreciated. That helps us spread the good word of geology education abroad. I appreciate everyone that's here so far. We'll get officially started in a couple more minutes. I think I've got 3 or so minutes to go on my clock. A couple more shout outs. Frank from Spokane, Brittany from Arkansas, Mitch from Saskatchewan, or maybe that's Saskatoon, I'm not sure. Phil from Cornwall, UK. Kareen is here from the Wales. Kylie from Australia, there we go. Jeffrey from New York State. Someone said they saw someone here from Lesotho, so there we've got Lesotho. I think is that in Africa or Asia? Now my geography is being challenged. Ken from Pocatello, Elsa from Oregon. Awesome. Marty is here. It's night in Eastern Asia. Yeah, probably a good point. We probably lose some folks depending on what time we do this. I do try to run these live streams at slightly different times so that it's easier for some of you. I get that if I do a live stream late in the day, my time, at like 3 or 4 o'clock in the afternoon, that's like, middle of the night if you're in Europe or in parts of Asia. So with this morning one, that hopefully has worked out a little better for some of our folks, but also just the constraints of my day and my time and stuff too. But trying to hit a sweet spot that will, work for as many people as possible. So yeah, liking, sharing, making sure you're subscribed. Someone had told me that YouTube somehow unsubscribed them, and so they had to like resubscribe to the channel. I don't know how that works. I don't know why that would happen, but something to be aware of. So just make sure you're signed up and subscribed and all good to go, so that nothing really goes awry there. Just quick text to Amanda Joe. Yeah, maybe 2 more minutes and we'll get started here. Last round of shout outs to folks. Jenny from Kansas. Paul from Hampshire, South England. Oh, Lesotho, landlocked, surrounded by South Africa on all sides. Yes, I do remember that now. Thank you, Daniel. Yeah, it's completely surrounded by the country of South Africa, and it's right there, kind of in the middle. Yes, thank you for reminding me. Susan from Washington. Camille, she says it's 11 o'clock in Vietnam right there where she's at. So there's someone staying up late in Asia. Appreciate you. South Indiana, Bradley is excited. 2:30 a.m. where Mr. Muppet fan is. Wow, some of you are either night owls or burning the midnight oil. I'll totally admit that I am. My wife and I, like it if it's like 9-10 o'clock, it is bedtime, and the only time I get up way early is if there's an eruption. Like it's got to be something pretty big to get me rolling at some of those crazy hours of the night. Northern Last from the heart of Texas. Mike from Big Fork, Montana. Maybe 1 more minute to go here, and then we'll get started, folks. Carola from Austria. Aaron from Saskatchewan. Yeah, so Steffi's mentioning that the unsubscribe thing. I'm not sure what's happening. Just make sure that little bell button's filled in on the YouTube page, and then you'll make sure you get notifications and such. So, Matthew from Seattle. Yeah, Karen from Florida. We'll kind of round it out right there. And it's midnight in Perth, West Australia, says Mirren. So, crazy. Well, it is the top of the hour, so let me grab my little notes here, look at the camera, and get started officially. 1, 2, 3, go. Thanks for joining me. My name is Shawn Willsey. I'm a geology professor. This is my YouTube channel where we promote geology education. We track some volcanoes on the planet. I post field trip videos in different locations, and in general, just try to get people outside, inspire them to learn about our planet, about its amazing history, features. I teach geology for a living, and this YouTube channel is just a great outlet for me to also help other people in the public learn more about geology. So welcome. I want to give a special thank you to our moderators today. We have Lisa and Mandy Joe, also known as Amanda Joe, and Susan Helmer, who are our moderators for today. So I want to give them a proper shout out for running the live chat. It's a lot going on there. It can be overwhelming to me. This channel has grown, which is great, but it's grown to the point where I need help. And so I really appreciate them being on there. They're going to organize the questions. So if you have any questions for me that I'll address, at the end of the live stream, just follow the directions that they're giving you there, along with Nightbot, which is an automated moderator, and they will aggregate those questions, send those to me in a couple of emails, and I'll do my best to answer those and get to those as I can towards the end there. So thanks again for joining us. Our last update on Iceland was this past Monday, February 12th, and it's been pretty slow since then. But one thing that came out of that live stream, or it wasn't a live stream, I suppose. I think it was just a regular video update, wasn't it? Can't remember now. I think it was just regular update. But one thing I talked about in that specific video update from Monday was I talked a little bit about a article where they quoted and had talked to one of the geology professors in Iceland, Professor Thordarson, and he had talked about maybe he was expecting the eruptive sites to possibly move to the west, and I wondered out loud what was his data, what was his rationale, and just wishing I knew more about how he came to that conclusion. And someone in one of the comments said, "Hey, well, you should just like reach out to him and ask him." And on a whim, I thought I should do that. That's a good idea. So, not expecting to get much, I actually emailed that professor on Monday afternoon, heard back from him on Wednesday, and he has agreed, although we haven't firmed up any times or days yet, but he's agreed to come on my channel and be interviewed by me. And so I think mainly have a discussion, not really an interview per se, but to talk about the eruption with me, which will be great. So I've got like a list of questions in my head. I need to put them on paper, but look for that maybe sometime in the next week or two, is a interview and a discussion with Professor Thordarson from the University of Iceland there, and then I can ask him some of those questions I've had about not just some of the data, but just everything I can think of. So that's exciting. So thank you to that viewer. I can't remember who you are, that kind of poked me and prompted me to actually send him an email. I really hadn't thought about doing that because it's like, well, he's pretty busy and he's not going to want to do this, but he was willing to do it. So I appreciate that. So hopefully we'll get that set up soon, and that will be exciting for me. And I've never done yet, although I have Nick Zentner is going to come on here. That's planned. I guess I can announce that. Nick Zentner, who many of you know, and also runs a YouTube channel based in the Pacific Northwest. I was on his YouTube channel about a week and a half, I suppose, ago, and he's agreed to come on mine and be a guest on my YouTube channel during a live stream event. And that'll be Sunday, March 3rd at 10 a.m. Mountain Standard Time, which would be 5 p.m. UTC. So I'll put some more announcements up for that. You'll see that coming up, but that's something else to look forward to. So that'll be kind of exciting. I've never interviewed someone, if that's the right term, or had a live stream guest, but that's something I'm interested in doing. In fact, I made a list the other night of all the geology contacts I know, which wasn't a very long list, unfortunately, but people I thought might be of interest or had some interesting perspectives or interesting jobs or careers. And so I think that's something I want to start to kind of sprinkle in, is having more of like an interview type series there. So yeah, so those are some announcements. We've been staring at this boring slide for 5 minutes, so let me move along, but let me first just remind you of kind of what we're doing here today with our live stream broadcast. We're going to start off with some field trip announcements that I have finally put together. Then the bulk of this live stream will be our update on Iceland, looking at the data, looking at some of the news. I had a viewer named Bruce that I want to talk about some of the work he's been doing in aggregating some of the earthquake data and animating it, which I think you'll find really interesting, as I did. And then we'll wrap up at the end with questions from you that I can answer as best I can. Those, of course, you should put in the live chat, and follow the directions there from our moderators. They're the people's names that are in blue with the little wrench next to them. And so they're doing the bulk of the heavy lifting there while I just kind of talk to the screen. So first of all, let's get to some field trip announcements. So I announced some of these last time we live streamed last week, but I didn't have some firm dates yet on these June trips, and I do have those now. And The reason for the delay was I'm a river rafter, and we put in every year for permits to go do multi-day trips on different rivers. And we got our notification yesterday. It always comes on Valentine's Day, February 14th, that we were, not just myself, but my wife and the other people we go rafting with, all of us were unsuccessful in our application to land a permit for the main salmon river. And we also failed in getting a permit for the Yampa and Green River over in Utah. So that's the bad news for me. The good news for you is that forced my hand in terms of, okay, that cleared up my calendar and I could actually pick some dates. So I'm looking at a 3-day window, and I'll talk here in a second about exactly where these field trips are going. So there's this one coming up April 12th and 13th here in the Twin Falls area. The Iceland trip is filled for this year. But there'll be some regional trips again in June. This is over I think Thursday, Friday, Saturday time window. You can email me at this email address if you're interested in either the April or the June trips, and I can put you on the list and send you more information about where we're meeting and how it's going to work, that sort of thing. And then I'll probably do some other ones later in the summer and fall, but just not ready to make those firm plans yet. And then looking forward to next year, 2025, we'll do another trip to Iceland, probably in May. A Big Island Hawaii trip. Haven't figured out when that one's going to take place, but I'll work on that. The Grand Canyon River trip is already filled. So that one, we'll do another one the following year, 2026, but for 2025, that one's filled. And then much like I'm doing this year, I'm sure I'll have some other regional trips. I'm starting out with sort of the Twin Falls, southern Idaho area, and I'll probably continue to run those each year until there's no more interest. But I do plan on eventually maybe branching out a little bit and doing trips in other regions of the Western U.S. And so just look for those. But right now I'm starting small, starting simple, just out of my own hometown, sleeping in my own bed. But eventually I do plan on doing some other ones as well. So anyway, and then a little bit more on the field trips. So if you want to know kind of where we're going, the April field trips will be to the same locations I went in October. So that was my very first time having YouTube viewers come and participate on day-long field trips. And so I'm going to run that exact same field trip back because it was so successful. We only had maybe 20 to 25 people. And so now I'm hoping to get a fresh batch of people that can come to that. But here's the itinerary for those 2 days in terms of what we're seeing in terms of themes. So Friday we'll be looking at Bonneville flood features, the interaction between lava and water in different parts of the Snake River Plain. The volcanic rocks are prominently featured, and then these are a few of the locations that we'll hit. If you have no idea where these are, you could probably look them up, or you could ask me any questions you might have. And then on Saturday, we'll head west from Twin Falls over to places like Malad Gorge, Box Canyon, Thousand Springs, and we will explore these sorts of stories: big mega floods, the aquifer underneath the Snake River Plain, and the role of lava dams, lava that has flowed into the Snake River and completely dammed up the river. So fun little picture of Box Canyon there on the left. Some of the field trip participants from last October, and then another photo there on the bottom of us out at Box Canyon looking at some of the evidence for the big flooding event there. So that's the April one. And then in June, what I decided to do, I've been kind of waffling about where to go, and I just haven't been able to come up with a good solid direction, but this is what I've settled on, for better or worse. And so Thursday, and the reason I've decided to spill these over into the weekday is Craters of the Moon and City Rocks can be a little bit busier on the weekend, and so by putting those on weekdays, it won't be nearly as crowded, and that might play into our favor. So Thursday will be out to Craters of the Moon. Friday is an area, and that's the photo here in the bottom left corner, City of Rocks, which is just a really magical place of both old and newer rocks. It's not volcanic rock, so it's something different. If you're like, geez, this guy just looks at volcanic rocks all day. These are granitic rocks. There's some very old basement rocks, some metamorphic rocks. There's some really cool weathering features there. It's a neat story. So we'll go there on Friday, and then Saturday is kind of a little loop north of Twin Falls, hitting Black Magic Canyon, and that's the photo there on the right. That's from several years ago. That's my middle child. He's now 18 and 6'3" and almost 200 pounds. He's a big kid, but that's him some number of years ago, hiking through Black Magic Canyon. There's another place called Little City of Rocks, not to be confused with where we're going on Friday. This is a completely different landscape, different types of rocks, different story, and then some other little places along the way. So those are the destinations for the Thursday, Friday, Saturday, June. Oh, I guess I've got a typo on there. Maybe we can just fix that in real time. There we go. 22nd. And now it's fixed. All right, 20th, 21st, 22nd of June. So you can email me at my Gmail address, shawnwillsey@gmail.com, if you're interested in these, and then I will send you a form, a letter that has more information about where to meet, how this is all going to work. The idea with these trips is you can kind of stay where you want to, but Twin Falls is a pretty good base camp to be located in, and then we would do these as day trips. Craters of the Moon's like about an hour-and-a-half drive. City Rock's about the same, and then these places here are a little bit closer. So, okay, so that's the field trip portion of the live stream. Let's move on to the update from Iceland. So let's start with the Met Office. They just put out a update literally within the last hour or so. Let's see if it is available in English, because when I clicked on it a little, yeah, so this is the problem. Some of you said, hey, you should just go to the English site. I know they have an English site, but notice that the most recent update is from February 9th. And so that's why I oftentimes go to the, and I'll just kind of show you this, I guess, go to the Icelandic site, which has an update for today, February 15th, and then I do the Google Translate. I know it's not perfect and some things might get lost in that translation, but sometimes it takes them a little while to get their update translated properly into English. So let's go through this slowly. There's a little bit of new information here that I think is interesting, and then we'll get to some other data as well. So the short-term forecast, I suppose, for this system is that we're going to continue to see inflation just like we have with the last two. So we've had four big events, four significant events, I would say, geologic events. Over the past 3 months, we had the November 10th magma intrusion and the dike formation north of Grindavik. We had the eruption on December 18th. We had an eruption on January 14th. And then last week we had an eruption on February 8th. And so we've entered this phase, I suppose, of what could be, I'm hesitant to call it like a regular or cyclical type of behavior, because nature throws you curveballs all the time. I don't even really want to call it predictable behavior, but I think what we've seen the last three eruptions is a good model for at least approximating what might happen next and when it might happen. And so I think that's the thrust of their update today. So model calculations indicate magma will reach a similar position as before the last eruption in late February or early March. So basically we're a few weeks away from another possible eruptive event. So land rise in the Svartsengi area continues, and the pattern and speed is similar to what we've seen during the last three eruptions. Model calculations, this is the good part of the update. From the end of the eruption on February 9th showed that magma accumulation until yesterday, February 14th, is about 2 to 3 million cubic meters. So they're quantifying, based on modeling and the GPS data, how much magma has accumulated at about 5 kilometers depth beneath the power plant. It was estimated that when the eruption began on February 8th, there was about 10 million cubic meters of magma that moved from Svartsengi into the craters that it erupted through. Okay, so that's the critical number, apparently, or something close to that, is that 10 million cubic meters. Once we have model estimates that approach that, based on what we've seen in the past, we know that we're kind of in the zone where an eruption is very likely. If magma accumulation continues at the same rate, the amount of magma will reach 10 million cubic meters at the end of February or the beginning of March, when it can be assumed that the probability of a magma flow and eruption will increase significantly. These model calculations are based on GPS data, but will be updated as new satellite data arrives. So we're projecting out. We're looking at what's happened the last 3 times, looking at the uplift of the GPS stations over the last week and a half, and then projecting out and estimating when that eruption might be. Seismic activity remains mild, only small amount of earthquakes, but we do have seismic activity just to the east near the Fagradalsfjall area. There's been around 80 small earthquakes, all of them pretty small. Depth of the earthquakes is constantly around 6 to 8 kilometers, and we'll keep looking at things. And then the other thing they put out was their new hazard map for the area. And so it doesn't have the English translations yet, but I think in their update there they say that the main changes are that the probability of eruption has been reduced and that the probability of landslides into cracks and crack movements is considered high. I think there might be a little translation thing in the landslide thing, but maybe just rockfall maybe is a better term, I suppose. So they've dropped the level down because we're in this phase between eruptions. Remember that these hazard maps are only good or issued for a certain time window. So this is from today until next Thursday, the 22nd, at which point they'll update this hazard map. Possibly it'll be the same exact map, but possibly based on new data, they will amend it and change it to some degree. So there's our Met Office update. And if we look at the earthquakes, not much to talk about. We're in the quiet lull, remember, between eruptive events. So there's a little cluster of quakes offshore, but near Grindavik, nothing much happening along the system that has had the eruptions. Excuse me. And then as the update talked about, I'll grab a quick drink of water. As the update mentioned, there's this cluster, and there's been some ongoing, very minor seismic activity just to the east near the Fagradalsfjall eruptive sites from 2021 to 2023. So overall, low rates of earthquakes. We can look at that here with the Met Office data. If we just kind of come down to the graph, this is the number of quakes over the last 24 hours, and you can see very few, none that reached magnitude 2, only a couple that were above magnitude 1. And I don't think the weather has been awful there that was affecting the data. Amanda Jo can correct me there, but I think the weather's been good enough that this graph we're seeing here, it's probably a good reflection of the actual seismic activity. So, but she can correct me if I'm wrong there. So then that leads me to a viewer, Bruce Gardner, sent me some emails, and he has been getting the seismic data. He contacted the Met Office, and he wanted me to give a proper shout out to the Icelandic Met Office for their timeliness and responsiveness in getting back to him. Bruce basically emailed them and asked them how he could access some of their seismic data, and they sent him that data within a day or two, which is pretty remarkable given all the other things they have going on. And so what he's done here is Bruce has sent me a bunch of files, and I don't want to share all of them with you, but just maybe one or two. But he's put together, and this is really great work on his part, so thank you so much, Bruce. Basically taking all that seismic data, all the earthquakes in terms of their location and size and when they occurred, and plotted them up on this map, but then animated it over time. And what I want to ask Bruce to do, if he's willing to do one more of these, is I'd really like to see, and I'll send you an email, Bruce, in case you don't catch this. I'd like to see what the earthquakes look like on the Reykjanes Peninsula, like 6, 7, 8 years ago or something. Anything before late 2019. I'd really like to see how much earthquake activity we were seeing there, because what I want to do in showing this is address the notion that the whole peninsula is quote unquote waking up. I'm not disputing that, but I wonder if it's some recency bias. So you've probably seen that in some of the news articles I've shared with you. It's definitely been out there that we've not only had all the activity north of Grindavik and near the power plant, but every time there's a little cluster of earthquakes, and it makes sense. They're feeling some of these quakes in the capital area. People are kind of already on edge. Nature seems to be a little bit unleashed and unhinged right now. And so there's this notion that the whole peninsula is waking up, and it's just a matter of time until we have volcanoes popping off in a variety of regions here. I think there's at least that narrative that's out there. And I'm not saying that's not going to happen. I just wonder if there's maybe some recency bias that's making us think that way. So what this is here, let me show you this first animation he has. This is 2021. And if you remember, let me take you to this first. 2021 is when this whole thing more or less started. So let me take out a few of these distractions here. Well, let me leave the Blue Lagoon and the power plant there. So here's Grindavik, and our first eruption over the last 5 or so years was right here, March to September 2021. These eruptions happened up in these hills and valleys. These were the tourist-friendly eruptions. These were the eruptions of low viscosity lava that you had to hike a few kilometers to get to, but were fantastic. There's great footage out there on the internet of these eruptions, but they did not impact any infrastructure in Iceland. They didn't make it to the road. They didn't make it to the coast. There's no buildings or structures in here. So this was the first one in March to September. So that lasted 6 months. And we'll come back to this when we talk more about the magma flow rates through these systems. Then there was one in August and then that died down, September 2021. The next one occurred the following summer, and I was fortunate enough to be able to go visit that. So it was just slightly to the north. So when I had to hike into this, we hiked along this trail, hiked right past this brand new, basically year-old lava field, which was pretty incredible, and then swung around to the east, came down this hill, and there was a series of fissure vents and spatter cones more or less oriented here. But again, because it was confined to this valley, it didn't go very far. Now, they didn't know that at the time. Had that eruption gone on for a while, there was concerns that it could spill out of the valleys and head in various directions and possibly impact infrastructure. But it didn't, and that eruption died down after a few weeks. And then our most recent one in this area was just this last summer near this hill here called Litlihutter. And this was another short-lived eruption that just lasted a few weeks, July to August or so of 2023. And so this first animation I'm going to show you that Bruce put together is just for 2021. So it's going to mainly, this is the area we would expect to see some earthquakes in, because we know that this is going to have a big eruption around that time. Let me head back to this. So this goes from April 5th to September 18th. So at this point, the data he's captured here, the eruption basically already begun. So let me orient you here. Here's Grindavik. All the little triangles are volcanic vents, most of which are inactive now, of course. So here's the little Eldvarp system. All the little hills north of Grindavik, like Thorbjorn, Slingarfelt, all these ones we've talked about are various triangles there. But let's go ahead and let this run. It's going to go fast. You can keep track of the dates up here near the top. Oh, and this actually runs from, let me pause it real quick. So this actually starts at the beginning of the year. So that's actually good. That's what I wanted. So if you were around in 2021, this was the earthquake activity on the peninsula. So here's January 15th of that year. And it goes fast because it's, just day by day. But I guess the point I'm trying to make with all of this is if you just took any one of these dates and the earthquake activity you see here, it looks a lot like what we've seen the last couple months, right? Like places where it's more active, but then at other times you get clusters in other areas. And so think about over the course of the updates I've done with you good folks these last few months, we've seen little clusters of earthquakes up near Reykjavik. We've seen clusters of earthquakes over here in the Krishuvik system near Lake Klevravatten. we've seen earthquakes down here offshore, and you just sort of see that same pattern here. Um, and the only time these culminated in eruption, thinking back to here, 2021, was just this one area here that happened where we had the eruption in March. So here we are in February, and then boom, these go quick. There's probably a way I could slow this down, but so here we are, February 18th, February 22nd, and there's February 24th when I don't think the eruption started then, but that's when um, the magma was moving closer to the surface and things were definitely ramping up. So there's a big earthquake swarm on that day. But I mean, there's just broad earthquakes happening in the region. Even though the eruption is going to take place here, look over here in the Grindavik system. So there's earthquakes there, and yet there hasn't been an eruption there yet. Now, I'm not saying these aren't signs that that eruptions could happen there. I guess what I'm saying is my default is always to consider these regional earthquakes a response to stress and the tectonic stresses, and not so much magma moving in different places. And had we had magma moving into this next system to the east back in 2021, we should have seen some uplift and some ground deformation associated with that magma influx. And we haven't seen that for the most part. So, and now we're into March and the eruption's taking place. And so you're just seeing a huge amount of earthquakes there in March. Presumably as the eruption kind of gets, so the eruptions die down. The eruption's still happening, but the earthquakes are dying down because the plumbing system's established. Excuse me, the magma's making its way to the surface. So now we're into May. Eruption's still happening. Interesting data. I have one more of these I want to share with you. Hope this is interesting to you. So now we're into June of that year, 2021. Eruption's still going on, but you can see the seismicity drops way down. So it's really that initial intrusion of magma that is just before the eruption. That's when you get, in general, the greatest number of earthquakes and the largest quakes. And then we'll just let this run through. It's got like one more month to go, September 18th. So Bruce, really good job. Strong work. This is great. I really appreciated this. But I'd be really interested to see what this looks like prior to like late 2019 when we started getting some signs of unrest on the peninsula. So there's that one, and let me turn that one off for a second. And then this one is interesting. This is the 2023. So this is going to go through when it all started here in November of this past year of 2023. So this is going to go from October 2023 to February to today, basically, to basically the last little bit. So this should include all of the big events we just talked about: the November 10th dike intrusion, the December 18th eruption, January 14th eruption, and the February 18th eruption. And I don't want it to take too long, but I might slow it down just a little bit, just so we can digest this all. So here we are in October. So if you were in Iceland this past year, October 2nd, 2023, this is what was going on that day in terms of earthquakes. So if you were paying attention to earthquakes at that time, you were probably like, whoa, what's going on offshore? Like that looks significant. That's what's going on there. Is that tectonic? Is that volcanic? Over here near the Fagradalsfjall area, that probably wasn't as much a surprise because you've just seen 3 eruptions in that region in the last couple years. But just some interesting patterns, right? So now we're starting to see stuff closer to Grindavik here. Now it's October 6th. And this should really start ramping up as we get into late October. So now we're into mid-October, cluster here, little cluster offshore. And then now we're starting to see just north of Grindavik, right in the power plant area. So there's the magma starting to accumulate under the power plant. And that's when this thing kind of really hits the radar for the most part. That's certainly when it came onto my radar, was mid to late October. And this should really ramp up here in a second. Now we're at October 20th. 23rd. And then, yeah, by the time we got to the end of October, the 25th or so, this was definitely, I think this is when it was even starting to show up in the news, like the earthquakes and the seismic activity and the way that this was being interpreted was much more significant. So that magma intrusion, so we're in late October still here. So the earthquakes are generally confined to this area. Um, Here we are now in November, and this should really reach a real big crescendo here. But notice how many go off to the west here, right? I don't know how to explain that. November 5th, why did we have so many earthquakes trending southwest away from the power plant and the sill, the magma sill that underlies it, down into this area? And certainly if you were around at any one of these given times, looking at the data at that moment, you'd probably think that an eruption there was maybe at least somewhat likely. So maybe the Eldvorp system and down towards the tip of the peninsula, that looked more likely. Um, so I guess what I'm trying to do is show you how the recency bias of whatever data we're looking at can sometimes influence our perceptions and our interpretations a little bit. So here we are November 7th and then November 8th. I'm kind of going slow here because I know what's about to happen. Here's November 9th. And of course, we all know November 10th was the big day. And so I'm assuming this is just going to go ballistic here. And then here we are November 10th. There's the dike forming from just offshore, southwest of the town, and off to the northeast there on November 10th. There's the day the town gets evacuated. There's the day there are large and strong earthquakes shaking the whole peninsula. And here we are, November 11th. I guess the real climax was reached maybe right about there. But notice how many other quakes are triggered in outlying areas, right? So there's some good-sized circles here, well beyond where the dike is here. Again, caused by these stresses, right? You've just injected magma into a fracture. The fracture's been widened, and that stress is transmitted through the crust into the outlying areas, and that stress then triggers quakes in other places, but it's not necessarily magma being intruded there. So there we are. Now we're on November 13th, so things have kind of died down, but now we can see very much the earthquake activity is very well constrained to where the dike is, but we're still seeing, over at the Grindavik system, yeah, there's quakes going on there. That's because there's fractures, there's faults, they're being reactivated by these stresses. And could it be magma in the subsurface? It could. But the earthquakes alone don't tell that story. You can't go just on these quakes and jump to the conclusion that I'm seeing earthquakes over in this area, therefore it's got to be a volcano brewing. I think that's misleading. So yeah, we can buzz through this quickly, but now we're into mid to late November. So we dodged a bullet November 10th. I mean, the town was still evacuated, but we did not have an eruption then. And then by this point, I was with you guys. We were live streaming, and here we are December 4th. Earthquakes very much confined to the dike. And then this should reach a head here around the 18th. I don't know if you guys can see the number up there. We're on December 12th, 13th, 14th, 15th, 16th, 17th, 18th. Boom. So there's, actually that says 19, but we can go back just a skosh. And it was late in the day on the 18th, right? Yeah, so same thing. But yeah, there's the eruption on the first eruption of the sequence. Things die down. It's Christmas time. But still, earthquakes over here and off the map. And I mean, our map only shows so much, but you can see some of those quakes there. Now we're into the new year, January 1st. Now that we should see, I mean, look there. I remember reporting on these up by this, there's a little lake up there in the highlands, and people were wondering, is that the sign of another, are we going to see another eruption there? But look how quickly those come and go, right? They're there, and there's some aftershocks, and then they're gone within a week or so. But this area persists because we have a stress here that's going on. Oh, I just skipped go back a bit to the January 13th, January 14th. So there's that January 14th eruption. That was the one that was closer to Grindavik, the one that was further to the south. And so you can see that reflected here, more earthquakes further south than what we saw on the December 18th eruption. Things dying back down. We've released some of that pressure. System's inflating again. It's pressurizing. We're into late January. And then this should build back up to the February 8th eruption. Now we're into February 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th. And there's our most recent eruption last week that flowed towards the power plant and took out part of the road and the pipeline there. So, and then Bruce has this going up until this week. He's got it going till, yeah, just till the 14th. So I don't know. Hopefully that was helpful. The whole point of that was, one, to show the great work that Bruce put together. So thanks so much again, Bruce. But then to also, I'd been curious all along, like looking at the earthquake data day to day versus looking at it more completely over time. So this is exactly what I kind of wanted to see in my mind. So thanks again to Bruce for sharing that with us. And I hope that made sense. So to conclude and maybe to sum up, my take on this is that just because we get earthquake clusters in other areas, like we're seeing right here in real time, right? There's, not much of a cluster, but 7, 8 earthquakes in the last 24 hours. Over here near, well, this is more Fagradalsfjord, but we've seen some over here near Krishuvik, other places. We had the one earthquake that was felt near the capital area. Or this one down here, the ones offshore. Just because we see these, we just don't want to, I think we don't want to rush to the conclusion that the peninsula is waking up, that the whole thing's about to become volcanically active. That may be how this goes, but right now I think these are just, more or less tectonic earthquakes caused by stress because we've injected magma into the crust here. We've changed the stress conditions in the region with the magma influx, and so that's changing things a little bit. Could these become earthquakes that are related to magma intrusion? They could, but we'd need to see some supporting data, I think, before we put that headline out there. So that was just the whole intent of that. So hopefully that made some sense. Okay, moving on. Let's look at some of the GPS data. And let's start with the Svartsengi station, which is the one we've been looking at the most. And so there's our uplift through the end of November, the December 18th eruption, the January. This is one of my questions I'll have for Professor Thordarson, is why we didn't see deflation on the January 14th event. Why was there not a downward movement of the GPS station? I don't know that I can explain that well myself. I have a couple ideas, but I just want to see what his take on that is. And then here we are with the February 8th eruption over here on the right side of this graph. And then here's our uplift since then. And you can see that it's started out pretty steep, but it may be, there's some wiggle in the data there, but it may be slowing a little bit. So the idea is, when do we get this trend of red dots here on the far right? When do they get back close to this threshold here, right around 240 millimeters? And will that be the threshold that actually triggers the eruption? Is it going to take more than that? All good questions that need to be answered. We've certainly seen, the Eldvorp station is a fun one to look at because it's just well behaved. Uplift, eruption, inflation, uplift, eruption, inflation, uplift, eruption. But you can see it's moved up just a little bit each time. That trigger point, or that highest elevation that the GPS station rose to prior to eruption, it moved. Those two are pretty close, but definitely moved up a little bit on this last eruption. And so where will that actually be? And so this is right back to the Met Office update, taking all this data, assuming that the magma influx rate is constant, which we'll probably continue to assume until we have other data. That leads us to believe that our next eruption is likely at the end of the month or early March. And so we'll keep watching that data there to see how that looks. Okay, so that's the GPS data. Not sure, I kind of glanced at this already. I'm not sure that we want to spend too much more time on that, but we'll continue to observe those trends as they come. Let's look at some of the news related to the science here, and then we'll switch over to the human story. So this was a good article here, and again, Amanda Jo helped compile these and send these to me, so thanks as always to her for doing a great job of getting me the Icelandic news and giving me summaries on it. So what they've done here, there's a nice graphic here. Let me maybe make that a skosh bigger for you. Um, that, oh, that's too big. There we go. That's probably big enough. Um, Basically, it looks at all 6 eruptions. So if we look at not just these 3 over here, the Fagradalsfjall eruptions of 2021 to 2023, but the last 3 eruptions in this area, the one in December, shown in orange, the one in January, shown in pink, that was closer to town, and this most recent one, the February eruption, which is shown in red here. If we look at those 3 eruptions, not in terms of volume. So let's be really clear here what this graphic is showing us. It's not showing us how much lava came out of the ground. It's showing us the rate that the lava was erupted. So basically, if you want to think of it as, it's not really velocity because it's volume. So how much magma came out per second? Okay, it's discharge rate or flow rate. So if we start with that first eruption in 2021, it had an average flow rate of about 10 cubic meters per second. And this was the tourist-friendly eruption. This was the eruption you could get really close to and you could see lava being spit out, but it was coming out at a fairly low rate. And it was able to sustain, remember that eruption lasted 6 months. So with a slow flow rate, you can erupt more lava over a longer period of time, right? So that eruption went for a solid 6 months at this average flow rate here. In 2022, when I was there, the flow rate was much higher than that. It was about 3 times as high, but this eruption didn't last as long. This eruption was over and done with within the whole month of August. So it started in early August, and by the end of August, it was completely finished. So it only lasted 3 or so weeks. Then the eruption this past summer, just to the north, had a similar flow rate, and again, it only lasted about 3 or so weeks. And then we look at the 3 eruptions that took place near Grindavik. And so we start with the eruption in December. So that's this top one here, where we had flow rates of about 100 to 300 cubic meters per second. So 10 times the flow rate of magma onto the surface as what we saw in those 3 previous eruptions over in the Fagradalsfjall system. So much, much more rapid. Then the next one in the series would be the the January eruption, January 14th, the one closest to town, which had a similar flow rate but was a little bit lower overall, okay, 100 to 200, but still 10 times bigger than these here to the east. And then most recently, the eruption that happened last week, February 8th, that was the fastest of them all at 400 to 600 cubic meters per second. So it came with a bang, but remember, it also lasted a day at the most, right? This lasted literally 24 to 30 hours, depending on how you want to measure it. So what this could be indicating, and I don't know what the numbers are right now in terms of total volume erupted. So that would be another interesting comparison. I don't have those numbers available at the moment. But what we might be seeing here is that over time, especially with these 3, because we can see there's been an increase, right? Started here in December, 100 to 300, similar in January, right? But then when in February, and remember that the February eruption was very similar to the location of the December eruption. And in fact, it almost coincides in some places. Those vents were in the same location. And so one way to interpret this might be that because those plumbing systems were established, because those conduits were already there, you could erupt a lot more of the lava quickly than in the prior eruptions, where that lava had to kind of work its way through narrow cracks and widen them at the time. This probably has wider vents, and that's why we saw greater output of lava, but also a shorter duration eruption over time. So just some interesting data there. You could probably come to some other conclusions as well as to what that actually means. But a nice little graphic there that explains this. So the recent eruptions that we've seen have been impressive, but they are they dissipate quickly. Like if you're not there to see it, like it's over quite quickly. Whereas in the past, the last three eruptions, um, the earlier three eruptions lasted for months or weeks because they had these much slower flow rates. So it could be that the magma volume that gets erupted is quite similar in all six. I wouldn't be surprised if they're all pretty much fairly similar order of magnitude, let's say. But it's really these flow rates that are the big difference here in terms of how quickly it's erupting that material at the surface. Presumably, back in 2021, 2022, those it was coming out of smaller conduits. The fissures and the fractures were narrower. Maybe the fissures weren't as long and they were shorter. I think that's definitely the case if you look at the length of some of those fissures, and I'm sure we could probably measure those as well. But interesting little article there. And then the last thing related to the science is Amanda Jo was able to go back into Grindavik this past week. I can't remember what day it was. It might have been, I think it was yesterday or Tuesday, either Tuesday or Wednesday of this past week. And what she saw there on the ground, sitting on the snow in many places, was lots of tephra. So this is all pieces of lava that were erupted on February 8th, last week. They were very airy, so they had a lot of gas content to them. Remember, we had strong winds out of the north at the time, so we ended up with quite a bit of material that was erupted way up here, right, just due east of the power plant. This is the red eruption that we're talking about here. Let's get rid of the other two just for a second to keep it simple. And the strong winds out of the northeast, blew some of that material, kept that tephra, those little tiny filaments of lava, suspended in the air, and then they rained down on the town of Grindavik. So we're looking at a couple kilometers there, or a few miles distance, where those actually fell out of the sky. And so she's got some nice pictures here that show these little pieces. You can see some of them, a lot of them are very elongated, almost look like hairs. Sometimes they can get drawn out into, there's a real thin one down here. They can get drawn out into very thin fibers, and in Hawaii they're called Pele's hairs, or if they're more kind of teardrop shape, they're called Pele's tears. But it's a fairly common phenomenon where you get lava being erupted, fountaining, being thrown out of the sky, and then it's sort of wafted through the air and carried by the winds, and then they fall downwind. It probably worked out really well that they fell onto the snow and ice, where they just stand out so well in contrast. Had this just fallen on the ground in the summertime, they would be a lot less noticeable. So she's got some nice pictures here. You can see some of these really thin ones are incredibly fragile. They really are about the diameter of a human hair in some instances, but they're brittle. They snap and break, and they're glassy. They tend to be quite glassy in terms of their texture, overall appearance, because this is lava that was thrown up into the sky as a little kind of blob of lava, cooled quickly, and is light enough in terms of its weight that it was carried downwind and then settled on the ground. So there's some of the pictures she took, and then she's got a little video here looking at some of them. So thanks to Amanda Jo for sending this. But yeah, kind of all over the ground, just kind of making the snow look more dirty than it would. But yeah, really impressive there how much was around there. And then she sent a couple other pictures. I think that's the nursing home that has some of the big cracks in it, so you still can see some of the damage there. And there's just a quick video for fun dogs playing. Whoops, but then let me see. Whoops, I don't want to show all the Facebook stuff. I'm trying to show these other pictures she just sent me. Here we go. Today. So these are some collected pieces of tephra that she sent, so you can kind of see the geometry. A little bit up close look at some of that tephra. Kind of goldeny brown. That's pretty typical of this material. It's often iridescent, so you'll see like a play of colors in it. Pretty cool. So thanks, Amanda Jo, for sending those. Very nice. Okay, so a couple bits of human interest news, again from Amanda Jo, so thank you to her. So apparently today is the day that the government, the parliament is going to meet, and the only item on their agenda, so they'll get to it hopefully no matter what, is passing or discussing the bill on having the government provide the finances and buying out those homeowners in Grindavik who wish to sell their home. So that will help these people like Amanda Joe considerably, because that will free up a tremendous amount of their money that they can then put as a down payment on another house. So for people like her, this is big, big news that they're finally getting to this. It's been on the agenda for some time, but it's been tabled or delayed for whatever reason, and today's the big day that they should get to that. So that's great news. Oh, I guess I skipped a few things here. That's okay. Back to the pipeline. So remember, the biggest issue from last week's eruption was that we had the lava flow over the pipeline, and that disrupted the hot water supply and heat for tens of thousands of residents, which was a big deal in Iceland in the wintertime. The good news is that they've got that restored. I believe they're just waiting for it to get completely pressurized. Let's see down here. I'll come back to some of this in a second. Yeah, they're hoping by tomorrow that it's fully pressurized, and then that allows the heating systems to operate. So I think some of the homes are back up and running full tilt, but there's still some homes that don't have. They might have the hot water, but they don't have the heat yet. But that should happen tomorrow. And then their plan for when they put down these new pipes is they're going to bury these in some earth material, some soil, so that if there's a future eruption and it goes over that material, that soil and that earth material will insulate the pipe so that it's not damaged. And so I don't know exactly like how much material you need to put. I'm sure they've got engineers kind of working on that, but that's kind of where that stands now. This is an article that talks about how, make that a little smaller. A lot of the companies in Grindavik really are frustrated and would like the town to be open. Like as soon as an eruption ends and things look safe, why can't we open some of these businesses and homes up? We still have roadways that come into the town. It's not like it's isolated without access. And so they'd like to be able to operate their businesses, whether that's, the fishing industry or maybe some of the other businesses, restaurants in town. As long as the eruption, during that window between eruptions, it makes sense to them that they can operate their businesses effectively and safely during that time. So that's an interesting article, interesting perspective, and probably something that needs to be addressed and discussed more. Yeah, I'm trying to remember what this one was about. Yeah, I think this is a similar thing, that in between eruptions, we could use that time a lot better, that we could actually keep the companies going. Similar article to the one I just shared, I suppose. But between eruptions, we could probably be doing a better job collectively to allow access to the town, to allow those businesses to operate and not keep the town kind of shut down indefinitely. So, and then the last thing I have here is, let's see if this has been updated yet. Yeah, the Blue Lagoon is closed because they had to evacuate people at 6 a.m. last Tuesday when there was an eruption. Was it Tuesday? No, Thursday. I guess it's been a week. Yeah, there you go. But it says here we've made the decision to extend the closure through Thursday, February 15th, which is today, at which time the situation will be reassessed. So this is the last update I've seen. I don't know. I would expect them to come out with something later today, possibly tomorrow when they decide what they're going to do. But a real sticky situation at the Blue Lagoon. And they've obviously lost one of their access roads, right? The main road into the Blue Lagoon is now under lava. And I don't know if there's plans to rebuild over that right away. So for now, the only way to access it is to come in from the south on the west side of Grindavik and then take this little access road into the Blue Lagoon. So interesting situation there as we move forward. So I think that is all the news I have, and that's my update for today. So let's see what questions I can address from you fine folks. So let me go to my inbox. Oh boy, there's a lot of stuff here. And oh, real quick email I just got. Oh, let me provide one little bit of programming note real quick before I address this. So we're heading out tomorrow. It's a long weekend here in the States with the President's Day holiday this coming Monday. And my wife and I will be heading out with some friends to Bryce Canyon National Park, and we'll be going cross-country skiing. So, but I'll make sure there's some videos that get dropped, and I'll put some things in the hopper, so there's some content coming out over the weekend. But I won't be doing another Iceland update or live stream until at a minimum next Tuesday, and more likely Wednesday of next week. So just to let you know. But I just got an email from Johan, who works for Nature Eye, the drone company, and Johan doesn't live in this area. He lives up in North Iceland. I'm not sure which town he's in, probably Akureyri. He's in this area, but he is just sent me an email that the weather looks really good tomorrow, sunny, light winds, and maybe we should do a live stream and do a flight up here. He'll be here flying Friday to Sunday. So I might be able to do that tomorrow morning before we leave. So I don't know. So that's a possibility, but I don't want to make any promises right now. I need to look at our schedule and such. But that would be cool. It's an area I haven't really visited. I don't know much, but there are some fantastic volcanic features. There's this beautiful crater up here. I don't remember the name of it. We might just, fly around and have Johan take you guys on a tour, because he knows the area much better than I do, and I could jump in with any cool geology knowledge I have at any given time. This is a geothermal area, so there's like hot springs and such here. I believe they have a power plant up here as well. This area I'll be visiting this May, but I have not been there yet, so I'm excited to kind of go visit this. You can see another big lava flow over here. Krafla, so there's different volcanoes. It's a really, this is the plate boundary. This is just as exciting and active over time as the Reykjanes Peninsula is. This is the plate boundary. As it exits North Iceland, it comes through this area. It's oriented mostly north-south. So this is just as exciting of an area. Okay, so let me get to your questions. And thanks to Amanda Joe for sharing those. Let me just put these over here for a second. Okay, so my first batch of questions. I don't know what to show you guys. We'll just leave Iceland up there for now until questions prompt me otherwise. Good morning. Question for Shawn. What's a good basic book on tectonics? This is from Jeannie Rist. What's a good basic book on tectonics or basic geology? I'm a bit over my head diving into Volcano Tectonics by Gudmundsson. Oh my goodness. So yeah, on a previous live stream, I mentioned this book here as one that I'd started reading and digesting, Volcano Tectonics by August Gudmundsson. But it's a little heavy read. So if you've not had much geology, I don't recommend starting there. So I think, to answer her question, if she's new to geology, I think a good physical geology textbook, Geology 101, is a great place to start. There'll be a chapter on plate tectonics. There'll be a chapter on each rock type. There'll be a chapter on each type of earth process, so like landslides, earthquakes, volcanoes, faults and folds, glacial processes, windblown processes. So that'd probably be a good place to start. So hopefully that's helpful. From Liz Schmidt, I would also like to know, she would also like to know a good book for beginning geologists and Geology 101 and subsequent books. Yeah, and I do have plans at some point, always lots of plans, good intentions. I would like to start basically doing versions of the lectures that I do in Geology 101 that cover a lot of these sort of fundamental topics. I would like to start recording those here and then putting those out there as well on my YouTube channel. So I sort of envision, plate tectonics, that would probably be, I wouldn't want to dump like a 2 hour video out there. So maybe like that would be like 2 or 3 different videos that you could digest. And of course, volcanoes, types of volcanoes, just some of the basics, because we obviously just jumped into this Iceland thing. Um, Many of us did anyway, without a lot of background knowledge, which I think a lot of you have come up to speed, but it might be good to kind of go back to basics and make sure people are in a good spot. So, yeah, so I'll try to make those videos soon. In the meantime, Liz and Jeanne, I can't remember how you pronounce your name, um, a physical Geology 101 textbook, and I can make some recommendations. So maybe send me an email and I can send you a couple I recommend. From Tyran94, wondering if it's possible to determine if the eruption that caused the old Sunukgigar craters could have been created by the same type of intermittent eruptions like now. Yeah, that's a good question. So that question is asking, remember, if we take away all these eruptions that occurred, the existing crater row we see here, which was from, oh shoot, was it 800 years ago or 1200 years ago? Something like that. This existing crater row here, yeah, we probably don't have the resolution. So right now we're watching this eruption unfold over the last few weeks, and we've seen, the December eruption, the January, the February eruption. But those are only a couple weeks apart, maybe a month apart. As we look at more ancient eruptions, we generally don't have the resolution in our radiometric dating to tell if an eruption, we can't tell eruptions that are like a month apart. In this case, we would use carbon dating. We would look for some organic material that was burned during the eruption, and we would date that carbon to see what the age is. But whenever you get an age, you have error bars. So like the lab would tell you that the lava flow maybe is 1200 years old, but there's a plus or minus of, let's say, 100 years or 50 years or something like that. So we probably can't tell for sure if it had the kind of behavior that we're seeing today. That's a really good question, though. Like, did these older eruptive events have these sort of cyclical, I don't like using that word, but like if it had these intermittent, that's the word you used, types of behavior. And I don't think we have the resolution for that. The other thing that can happen is once you have that top layer, like let's assume that this older lava field is all the same age, well, you've buried possibly in many places the older events, and so you'd have to actually drill to get to that data, and it would take some effort and expense and time to do that. So good question. From Daniel Baumberger, looking at recent earthquake and GPS data, shaking and ground rise seems to have stopped or reversed in many stations. Thoughts? I didn't see that, but I didn't look super hard at where's that at? At the GPS data. So he's saying that shaking and ground, definitely the earthquakes have dropped down. So I agree with that. The earthquake activity, and we've seen that following these eruptions, the earthquake frequency drops down considerably. But you also say ground rise seems to have stopped or reversed. I think all the GPS stations, for the most part, we can just kind of pick one in here. It doesn't really matter. Let's use the Thorbjorn one. I mean, it depends on where you go, right? Like this one, yeah, maybe the last couple points here are kind of, just stagnating a little bit. But if you go to like the Blue Lagoon station, which is like right over the magma sill, yeah, there's 2 points that were a little bit lower, but if we throw those out, we can see a pretty good trend there. So good question. I don't know. Yeah, I don't know about the GPS part, but definitely with the earthquake part. From Noreen Martin, with the boreholes showing increased pressure and temperature prior to the eruptions, do you think it might be used to forecast eruptions at other volcanoes? I haven't seen anything, and maybe I just missed it, about this last eruption a week ago, if the borehole gauges detected increased temperatures and pressures prior to that event. Maybe they did and I didn't see it. The news event or the data we talked about earlier, it did happen for the December and January ones, but I don't know about the February one. Certainly, this would be about as, I mean, that was as close to the power plant borehole sensors as anything might be. And so you'd expect that this last eruption last week should have been detected there. So until it's something that's reliable, we wouldn't want to necessarily use it, because the worst thing you can do is start, um, putting your eggs in that basket, saying, "Hey, we've got a way to predict the timing of the eruptions." But if it's unreliable, then it's not very useful. So probably too early to say if that's very helpful. From Wolfgang Grieb, is it likely that this on-off scenario turns into a longer-lasting permanent stream of volcanic activity? I think until something changes, I don't think so. I think you would either need to increase the amount of magma into the system, or you would need to shut down the conduits and the vents so that you can maybe store more magma and then have an eruption that's more long lasting. Just lots of different variables at play there. So really good question from you. Next question. Oh, I lost it. Let me come back to that. Here we go. From Marty Smarty. Can you explain why there's volcanic lightning in some explosive eruptions, like in the Sakurajima eruption yesterday over in Japan? Yeah, so basically when you get and I'm not a physicist, so I might screw this up, so correct me if I'm wrong. But when you have an explosive eruption, to get lightning, you need positive and negative charges. So you often get those in big thunderstorm clouds because you get, I think it's positive ions near the base of the cloud and negative near the top, and then there's also the ground. And so by having these electrostatic charges that are different, that's what sets up the situation where lightning can take place. And during an eruption, it's similar in some respects to a billowing thunderstorm cloud, a cumulonimbus cloud, where the air is rising dramatically and you're building up on these particles that can generate lightning as those connections are made. So probably the best I can explain it. There's probably physicists laughing right now as I mumbled through that. From JCells 657, what do you see happening with Grindavik in the future? Will it still exist as a community, or is it uninhabitable going forward? I think, well, right now the government is passing a bill, hopefully, that will enable a lot of these homeowners to sell their property. Some may choose to keep their property. I think there'll always be, unless a lava flow wipes out the whole town, assuming that it can exist in some physical way, I think there'll always be some footprint here. The fishing port will continue to operate. There may be a few little businesses. If it's deemed safe enough to let tourists come in, people might visit on occasion. But I think the town is going to be forever changed, at least for the next decades or so, right? In terms of it's not going to be what it was 5 months ago. The community that existed there, that's been fractured by these events, unfortunately. So, yeah, I don't know. I don't have all the good answers as to what should be done there. It's hard decisions, and I certainly don't fault any decisions that have been made thus far, because it's just a sticky wicket to deal with, for sure. Pinball 1970, the volcanic system near Lake Klevervatten at risk, question mark. So that's over here. That's part of the Krishevik system. Or along the border with Grindavik. Is that a dormant set of volcanoes? What of Fagradalsfjall volcano? So, we have this volcanic system here. This one presumably could still become active again. It's not even a year from its last eruption. And while we've had earthquakes here, we could definitely have earthquakes here again, potentially in the future. But I'd say, is there a risk here? Yes. Like, should we build the next international airport somewhere in this region? No, that would be a bad idea. So is it at risk? Yeah, like it's probably going to have an eruption at some point, but right now I'm not seeing any signs that it's going to become volcanically active. That could change in a couple weeks, a couple months, or a couple years. So, but it's definitely, we know we have these volcanic tectonic systems that trend northeast southwest. There's good there's at least some compelling evidence to suggest they're more linked. I think we've treated them separately in the past, but maybe they're more linked than we think. And the time will just tell, right? We haven't been able to really measure and study this volcanic system in modern times, because the last time it erupted was 800 years ago. And now we've got 6 eruptions with more on the way, so we're learning more and more about it moving forward. From Gail Vaught, what causes the eruption to occur at different... Sorry, team. I accidentally unplugged my headphones. All right. Hopefully that was only a few minutes ago. I'm back. Sorry about that. I think I shifted in my chair and I inadvertently unplugged the headphones. So we're back. Folks hear me? We're good? Good to go? Yes? No? Maybe so? I see all the people saying, all right, and we're back. Good. I think I only cut out there for a minute, and thankfully Amanda Joe just messaged me on my phone, which I was able to see. Okay, so I think where was I? I was addressing the question about, I gotta find it. Sorry, I lost my train of thought there. Don't want that. We want this. Oh yeah, central volcanoes and why we get these fissure eruptions. So I was pointing out that we have one here that did occur in the same area that is a little central volcano. That's a shield volcano with a summit crater at the top. This little trend here is a collapsed lava tube system, but you can see the lava radiated out from one centralized vent. And then there's another one right here. And even these big hills here, which were subglacial volcanoes, these you could argue were centralized vent locations. But the reason is that we have these extensional stresses. We're in this tectonic zone where the plate boundary is opening up these fractures that run northeast, southwest, and then the magma is taking advantage of those pathways, and so we tend to get a lot of these fissure eruptions in those areas. So hopefully that makes sense. Sorry I cut out there for a minute. Had no idea I'd unplugged the cord there. So thanks for letting me know, Amanda Joe. Okay, next question. And next question is from Thomas N. Can we say anything about how long these eruptive cycles might last based on historic occurrences or data? I'm guessing it depends on magma influx, but can we say anything about that with what we see? I don't think we have enough. Oh, how long they might last. I think the last set of eruptions, I won't pull that up now. Some of these lasted hundreds of years based on the data we have. So we know that these volcanoes on the Reykjanes Peninsula can fire up after hundreds of years of inactivity, and then they're erupting intermittently for several hundred years. And so that's the best data we have. And I think we can go back 3 cycles of eruptions. That's how complete our record is. So it's not that complete, but that seems to be the way these have behaved in the past, which is interesting. It's kind of an interesting cycle of behavior. From Char70, unrelated to geology or volcanoes, but really want to know what is the plastic container behind Shawn, which we see in every video that is always half full. What is behind me? Oh, this is my peanut butter pretzels. So from Costco. And I got into these for a while, and I haven't eaten them much lately. So that's why the quantity more or less remains the same. So yeah, I probably should do a better job about thinking about my backdrop and such. It's pretty messy. There's books and papers. I do have some nice fish fossils up there. You probably can't see those from far away, but yeah, maybe one day we can do a video that is a tour of my office. But if you could see the rest of it right now, it's really messy. So not good. Okay, so that's the first batch of questions. Let me go to the second one. Okay, from Marcia Webb, I read a paper about how the Icelandic magma plume goes down. Can that be right? Magma plume goes down. I'm not sure what that question's asking, so I apologize, Marcia. From M&M, can you talk a little bit about the large earthquake that hit the southwest rift zone of Kilauea last week? Did I not cover that? Is that the dike event that we talked about? Or are you talking about the Pahala event? Those were a couple different things there. So yeah, probably not prepared to address that one right now. Basically, yeah, we had the earthquake swarms on the southwest rift zone of Kilauea, caused by a dike intrusion, very similar to what we had here in Iceland on November 10th. And then I did some updates around that time. And then there was another earthquake. I'm missing all the details in my head, that was further to the southwest near the town of Pahala, but it was much deeper. So it's all related to the magma there. That's one big difference between Hawaii and Iceland. Everything in Hawaii, for the most part, is volcanic, right? It's not on a plate boundary like Iceland is. Iceland and Hawaii are both hotspots, so they have anomalously high amounts of magma that erupts, but Hawaii is not on a plate boundary. It's not a divergent plate boundary. And so Iceland's definitely a little bit more complicated in trying to figure out which of those two forces or processes are dominating. Whereas in Hawaii, it's a little simpler. Like the magma coming up from depth is what is creating much of what you see in Hawaii. They do have places where, as the parts of the island move off of the hotspot and the sheer weight of the island sinks down, that can generate earthquakes a little bit as well. So, sorry I can't go into more detail on that one. From Jeff744, what signal would you need to see to conclude that the current cycle of eruptions is over? Is a stop of ground inflation earthquakes enough to reach that conclusion, or is more needed? Yeah, I would want to see, not the earthquakes, not so much, because we see these lulls in earthquakes like right now when there's no active magma influx. I think the GPS data and the ground deformation data right now would be, if that were to stabilize over weeks and months, that would be a good sign that magma is no longer accumulating in the subsurface. So that would be the first bit of information that we would look for to maybe show that this eruption cycle is ending and that we're entering some new phase. From Jeffrey Porter, could you touch briefly on lithospheric flexure? I recently learned that Hawaii subsides about 1 inch or 2.5 centimeters per year. Does this too gradually, is this too gradual to cause shallow earthquakes? Yeah, so the idea there is, with Hawaii, is that the sheer weight, well, let's get over here. There we are. So these islands, not just the big island, all of them are so massive. I mean, they rise off the seafloor. I mean, literally, even though that's the coastline of Hawaii, the base of the true volcanic edifice is way out here in the deep water. And they are so enormous. You've got literally miles, kilometers of rock stacked on top of itself. It's very dense, it's all basaltic, and it exerts a downward force or weight on the upper part of the mantle, on the asthenosphere. So the whole island sinks over time. So that's why when you go from the big island, which has tall volcanoes, right? I mean, Mauna Loa is over 13,000 feet. Mauna Kea is over 13,000 feet. But then as you head away from the hotspot to the less active volcanoes, Kohala is small. I think it's maybe 6,000 feet in height. You get over to Maui and Haleakala, it goes up to about 10,000 feet. But the whole point is, as you move up the Hawaiian chain to the northwest, overall the elevations of the islands decreases, partly because they're, well, for several reasons. They're older, they've subsided more, they've sunk down into the ocean, into the upper mantle more because of their weight, and they've been more eroded by rain and waves and such. So hopefully that helps a little bit. From Susan B, hand pick waving. Why doesn't a lot of the snow melt around the very hot lava in Iceland? It does. Now, you got to go look at some other imagery or whatever, but when they have snowfall on these recent, and all the recent, even over here, when snow falls on this lava flow that's 3 years old, it melts because the rock is still hot. It's still emanating heat from within. And so on these recent lava fields, the snow does not accumulate because the rock is too hot. From Perfect Duct, I visited the Rio Tinto mine in Utah, which has a vast amount of low-grade hydrothermal mineral deposit. Does or could Iceland have similar mining potential? Absolutely. Any volcanic region in the subsurface is likely to have appreciable amounts of mineral resources that could be exploited. The problem is they're still forming. It's still hot in the subsurface. There hasn't been erosion. In a place like Utah and the Rio Tinto mine, that formed millions of years ago. That magma body and its mineral deposits were uplifted close to the surface. People saw them, collected them, and then they excavated a big pit there. But undoubtedly underneath Yellowstone in New Zealand and Iceland, you have some mineral deposits that are forming for sure. From Joanne. Joanne, who made my hat. Thank you, Joanne. For your field trips, do you require a certain level of expertise for the participants? If so, do you offer any trips suitable for newbies? No, all of my field trips are for rank novices to people that have had quite a bit of geology. So, and I'm sure some of the other folks who went on my October field trip, if they're on the live chat, they could chime in with their perspective. But my field trips are for anyone. Anyone who's interested. You don't need to know fancy words. You don't need any prerequisite in geology in terms of knowledge. Just come with an enthusiasm to learn, to discuss, to learn from each other, including me learning from you. And that's kind of the vibe. So come one, come all. If you don't understand something, you ask me, and then I explain it in a different way, or we figure it out. And so the best way to learn geology too, of course, is not so much watching me on my computer on a live stream. It's being outside, looking at the actual evidence, looking at Earth processes at their real scale, context. That's the way you really learn geology. So thanks for your question. From Krogatho, is another phreatomagmatic event possible for the next eruption if it happens at Sunnigigar? So remember on last Thursday when we had an eruption, I think it was at the north end of the eruption, is when, while I was live streaming, we saw these plumes of water vapor and ash go up into the sky. Is it possible to have another one of those? Absolutely. And so for whatever reason, that part of the vent or the eruptive area was tapping an area that had greater groundwater flow, so probably more porosity and permeability in the rocks. The water can move through at a greater rate. And I think at that point in the eruption, the lava supply had dropped to the right ratio. So you'll get those types of eruptions if you can get the right amount of lava to water mixing. Early in this eruption, when it was producing 300 cubic meters per second of lava, there's no way there was enough groundwater to mix with that lava to make any difference. There was so much lava coming out of this thing early in its eruption last week that the groundwater was just kept at bay, flashed to steam, but you couldn't even tell if it was even a component. But I think later in the day, later in the eruption, after several hours had gone by, the lava supply had diminished, and so you were seeing some of that groundwater influx with it. So we could see it again, for sure. From Mark, is the speed of tectonic movement constant over the years at Iceland? Is speed related to volcanic activity? No, it's not constant. The movement of all tectonic plates and all faults is episodic. It's herky-jerky. It sticks for a while, and then it moves. So you build up stress, and then you generate enough stress that the rocks fail, and a faulting event occurs, and earthquakes occur, and then it becomes stable again for some period of time, and then the stress accumulates, and then it moves again. And it could be a strike slip fault where it's moving sideways. It could be other types of faults where the movement is in different directions, but it's not constant. So whenever we report rates of plate motion, realize those are always average rates. So when we say, oh, North America is moving 2 inches per year, or 5 centimeters per year, that's just an average. That doesn't mean it exactly moves that much per year. Why is the rift zone so spread out in southwest Iceland? I think it's just what we have here, of course, are these, let's take the roads out. We have these trends. So we have one volcanic system that comes in off the tip of the peninsula here and trends up through here, and then it steps over. So it's what we call an echelon pattern. So rather than just one crack and fracture running more or less east-west through the peninsula, it's defined by these segments. And that's true of all plate boundaries and fault systems, is they tend to be segmented. It's not one continuous through-going fault. It's broken up into segments, and each segment moves independently of the whole system. So one segment might fracture and fail and create earthquakes and maybe a volcano, and then another one could be at another time. And that's what we see with the earthquake patterns, right? We see these clusters near Svartsengi. We see clusters to the east. We see clusters offshore. Those are those different rift zones or volcanic systems operating independently. But they still, even though they're independent, they still can be affected by neighboring tectonic systems. From Scott Sluggo's Rule, any thought on the Italy volcano situation? Heard report of a lava dome up to 100 meters. I've not looked at the Italy volcano at all. Sorry, my bandwidth is pegged. I have not seen anything, or I can't comment at all on that. But it sounds pretty cool. I'll try to check it out. From 0G, we've seen quakes in Iceland, Hawaii, and Japan over recent weeks. I'm guessing quakes like lightning strikes are happening all the time. Are quakes across the world actually connected? No, earthquakes are not connected per se across big areas. Maybe pull up the USGS earthquake site. That might help a little bit here. So here are your earthquakes on planet Earth over the last day. Or if you want 7 days, here you go. Realize this is skewed towards the U.S., so you'll see lots of little circles in the U.S. because this is our monitoring system and earthquake activity. We just talked about it. Each tectonic boundary, it has segments to it, and so they act independently. They're not connected. Just because you have one big one in one area, there's a 6.1 near Japan, that doesn't mean it has any bearing on another one. Here's a 5.1 in Baja. They're completely separate. That being said, there is some research on something called earthquake triggering, where if you have an earthquake in some area, let's say up here in Alaska, as that seismic energy moves outward through the Earth's crust in all directions, could that earthquake trigger another fault system somewhere else that's like right on the precipice of it's going to have an earthquake any day now, And by generating an earthquake somewhere else, could that change the stress conditions enough that you get an earthquake a little sooner than you might otherwise? And there is some research that suggests that might be possible. But in terms of big earthquakes happening at the same time because they're all connected, not really. So, okay, let me go to my third and hopefully, oh boy, there's a lot of batch of questions. I'm probably going too slow here. Here's the third batch. We'll see what time we're at here. Marion wants me to do a Hawaii update soon. Yeah, I'll try to get back to that. Lots going on, teaching, just, yeah, magma. There seems to be many small deep earthquakes in Mauna Loa near Pahala. Yeah, those are the deeper ones that we think that's the conduit that brings the magma up, and from there it is disseminated towards Mauna Loa and to Kilauea. So I'll try to do a Hawaii update sometime soon. Benjamin wants to know, it'd be interesting to hear my opinion on Campi Flegrei in Italy. I haven't paid much attention to it. Again, I'll say that these big volcanic systems that are much more explosive, like the Campi Flegrei one in Italy, tend to take a lot longer to have eruptions. And so they tend to show these inflation-deflation signs. There can be little signs of unrest, but it still takes a lot of time and pressure, subsurface pressure, to build up to generate those bigger eruptions. From Gail Vaught, there are some volcanologists that say a pending eruption generally has a lull in earthquakes. Do you agree? I don't think there's anything predictable in that behavior. I think each eruption behaves a little bit differently. And certainly with Iceland, we have seen in the day or so preceding these eruptions that there were lulls, like there was diminished seismic activity, and then it kind of comes in hard anywhere from an hour or 6 hours before the eruption begins. So I don't think there's a strong pattern there. From Lauren Elizabeth, with these fish eruptions, is the bottom of the fissure open to the magma chamber along its full length, or does a rock crack and then fill with lava from one or more feeder tubes? That's a great question. There's a lot of variabilities here. The magma chamber, in the case of this location here around Grindavik, the magma chamber is underneath the power plant region off to the west, and it's feeding lava more or less horizontally. It might be moving up slope a little bit, but more or less horizontally to the east, and then it's intersecting a fracture system or a series of fracture systems that are interconnected that allow it to go to the surface. Now, when we say a fracture system, I don't mean a fracture that starts at the surface and goes down 5 kilometers, but it's found an interconnected pathway in order to come up. And you also have to remember thinking about it in 3 dimensions. So like when we looked at some of Bruce's earthquake data, we saw on that January earthquake or January eruption, there were earthquakes offshore, and yet we didn't get an eruption there. Well, the dike and the magma may have pushed up closer to the surface there, but it didn't make it all the way to the surface. So the dike is propagating, the magma is moving up through the dike, but it's also moving laterally as well. And so there's a lot of different variabilities there. Hopefully I answered your question. The magma propagating and forcing its way through the fracture is what breaks the rock and generates the earthquakes. From Tyran94, any way to determine, oh, we talked about that one. Xerox, what causes an eruption cycle to stop? Why would the source of magma to the main body on Svartsengi stop feeding it? You just get incremental pulses. I had a paper for that. I have no idea where that paper went. On magma influx. So it's episodic. So you get a period where magma is rising towards the surface. It comes in pulses, like a batch of magma rises towards the surface, fills that chamber, and it can continue to feed for some time, but then that supply of magma might wane a little bit. So it depends on the deeper seated sources of magma, what's actually generating the magma. Is it generating magma at a constant rate? Is it feeding that magma upwards? Sometimes magma rises and reaches a level of, it's neutrally buoyant, which means it doesn't need to rise any further, so it stays underground. But then as more gases rise into it, that increases its buoyancy, so then it rises further. So there's a lot of variables there. Rock Tapper Robin, were they monitoring uplift across the whole region in 2021? certainly they were. She's probably going back to Bruce's animation. And that's kind of what I want to see is I wasn't paying attention, to be honest, I wasn't paying attention to Iceland seismicity in 2018. I took students there on a field trip, but there was nothing to see here. I mean, there's things to see here, but we were not looking at an eruption in this area. And so I'd like to see what pre-2020 seismic patterns look like in this area. That would be interesting to me. From Nunya, is there any space spot on Iceland where lava won't erupt from? Probably the safest regions where lava is likely to not erupt anytime soon. This area up here, the West Fjords, this is a volcanic region here, the Snæfellsnes Peninsula. But this area here was active like 10 million years ago, but it's largely inactive. So we don't anticipate any eruptions here. Much of the interior of Iceland is still potentially, I mean, the plate boundary comes right through here and then goes up to the north. I guess another somewhat safe spot might be the far eastern edge of Iceland as well. Eruptions are less likely there. But the interior, the Reykjanes Peninsula, this peninsula here, is all very much active. M. Hull, is this why the geologist is predicting eruptions west of Grindavik? Yeah, not sure what the context was when your question came through, but yeah, maybe he's looking at some of the earthquake stuff I was showing that was from Bruce. And Humphrey, I'm trying to figure out what the size of the circle tells the strength of the earthquake. Is there a table? Yeah, so going back to Bruce's stuff, I don't think he has, I mean, the size of the earthquake is undoubtedly the magnitude, but I don't know, like, that size of a circle, is that a 3, is that a 2, is that a 4? I'm not sure. So I'm sure he's sent me a bunch of stuff. It's probably in there somewhere, and I just haven't looked at it. So from Aston, who lives in Iceland and has sent me some good information. Do your students know about your channel? Do they watch your live streams? My college students do know I have a YouTube channel because the first day of class I showed them it as a resource because there's lots of good stuff on there. I think there's 1 or 2 that do watch the live streams and kind of know what I'm doing, but I think most of them, if we're being totally honest here, are completely oblivious and have no idea. So, yeah. They don't know. They just, you know, they're in school. I mean, it's young adults, right? They're just trying to figure life out as they can. So, okay, a little bit more. It looks like we've got another batch or 2 of questions. How are we doing here, team? Do we need? Yeah, thanks, Amanda Jo. Yeah, she sent me 5 pages of questions. I think that's good for today. Let's see if I can get through them, though. I'm going to take a drink of water, and let's power through. If you're still with us, I appreciate it. Thanks everyone for jumping on here, being part of this. I hope it's worth your time and it's worthwhile to you. Let me check and see how many people are actually on here. There are. Oh, we still have a couple thousand people. That's great. All right, next round of questions. So let me find those. That was the first round of questions. Question round 4. It's like a game show here. Bill Biesel, where is the mid-ocean ridge on the map or in relation to the recent activity? I can show you that, Bill. Do I have? Let's see. Is that going to work? Ah, there you go. Haha. So there is, let me get rid of some of this other stuff. There is the plate boundary running through the North Atlantic and through Iceland. So now when we draw plate boundaries on maps, you know, it's not a straight line. So there you can see it cutting through the Reykjanes Peninsula. But I just told you that there's a series of, there's a tectonic set here, another one here, another one here. So this is just like an approximation. A plate boundary is not a straight line. And even though there's places at Thingvellir where they can say you can scuba dive and snorkel between 2 tectonic plates, and there's a bridge down here on the peninsula called Sandvik. Where's that at? There's a place out here where you can pull in your tour bus and go stand on that bridge. The bridge says that if you're on the sign says if you're on this side of the bridge, you're on the North American plate. If you're on this side, you're on the Eurasian plate. That's exciting. It's a nice photo opportunity. That's flat out wrong. Like plate boundaries are more complicated. It's a zone. It's a series of systems and fractures. Now, are these fracture systems here related to the plate boundary? Absolutely. But are they exactly right on the plate boundary? Can you put 1 foot on one plate and 1 foot on the other? No. But your question is, where's the mid-ocean ridge? It's to the southwest. It runs through the Atlantic, and then it comes up, splits Iceland, and then heads off into the northern Atlantic. From Biker Trash, the November 10th data looks like the activity was not just at the future eruption site, but also extended along the plate boundary. Is that correct? Yeah, I think so. I think it did actually move along that tectonic boundary. So, good question there. Care Fraser, will uplift always happen prior to an eruption, or can it without any warning? If you're intruding magma, you should have ground deformation associated with that. I suppose there's a way to have an eruption without appreciable ground deformation, and there's a good chance that's happened in the past. But generally, it's a good sign. It's one of the precursor signs to an eruption. Dolphin Cat, did the explosive element in the last eruption leave a bowl along the fissure at all? Wondering if it looks like King's Bowl. Yeah, I don't know. That would be. I wondered that out loud during that live stream. Is that did this last eruption last week when we had that phreatomagmatic eruption where the lava was interacting with the groundwater? It would be interesting to get a drone or something over this area and see what that looks like. And I don't know, like if I would expect based on how long that phreatomagmatic eruption went and how much ash we saw coming out of the ground, I think it had to have left a topographic landform on the surface. So we should see something there that it looks a little different. For Michelle, how are things going in Hawaii with their volcano? It's always something happening in Hawaii, but it's kind of like background noise right now. They're still having some earthquakes along that dike zone. It's still, I think, showing signs of inflation, so there should be an eruption coming soon. And I'll try to find some time to do another Kilauea eruption. From Ann Umphrey, she asked, what is the thinking about the increased liquidity and faster flow as time goes forward? I think she's talking about the magma and maybe that graphic I showed with the last ones. Yeah, so it could be if you can get the magma to the surface quicker, then it's going to tend to be hotter. And so you're going to have a lower viscosity magma there. The faster flow is going to be partly the viscosity of the magma, but also how big the conduits are, right? So how wide is that conduit? How long is the conduit? And so those are some of the variables there too. From Jared, since it has this almost 30-day pattern, does that mean the tidal forces are helping the eruptions? Probably not. They're not the dominant factor, but there is some studies that have been done that have looked at tidal forces being the one last little trigger needed to get an eruption over the hump, if you will. So kind of like, you add all this weight to something and it doesn't break, and then someone puts, a quarter on top and it collapses. So the idea there is that there probably is a small role that tidal forces play in triggering some eruptions. But you can't just look at the tidal behavior and be like, oh, we've got a full moon coming, therefore we have an eruption coming. So like if the tidal forces were in perfect alignment tomorrow, I wouldn't expect to see an eruption here because the system just isn't really, it's not inflated to the right point. It's not really primed and ready to go. From Kate Clover, have petrologists analyzed the magma from the different eruptions? Are they similar? They're broadly similar, but there's some small differences, and they can look at how quickly the crystals grow and how large they are, what their elements are made out of, and that gives them some idea as to how long that magma stayed, what the story of that magma is. Did it come from deep all the way to the surface quite quickly? Did it come up into some shallow reservoir and just sit there for a while? Those are some of the things that they can deduce by looking at crystals and like the zoning around crystals that form in the magma. From Meek Merch, how can we measure how much is spit out by such an eruption? We seem to have numbers of cubic meters per second. How do we know? So the volume of the eruption will be the area, so we can spatially, just like right there on my Google Earth image, we can trace this whole red area, measure its extent and diameter, and then we can go in and look at, I don't know if this will actually pull up. No, okay. But you could measure the area here, the diameter, and then you could go through it and measure the thickness. So if you have the thickness and you have the area, then you can figure out the volume. So that's how we would figure out how much magma was erupted. And it's an estimate, right? I mean, some of the stuff from this eruption blew downwind and landed on the ground near Grindavik, and Amanda Jo picked up a few pieces. So is it a perfect representation of the full volume? No, not necessarily, but it's a good estimate. And so that's how we get the volume of eruptive material, is taking the area of the lava field, or if it was ash, it'd be the area that ash fell over, and then measuring the thickness and quantifying that. Flying Fury, does lava have a particular smell? Does it vary from location to location? Well, what you smell when you're near a lava flow are the volcanic gases. So you'll smell the hydrogen sulfide, the sulfur dioxide. There's carbon dioxide coming out too, but that's odorless. There's water vapor coming out, but that's odorless. So you'll smell that stinky sulfur smell mostly. Okay, last dump of questions. I am on the home stretch here. Okay, batch number 5 from Amanda Jo. And thank you all for sending in questions. So we'll run through these questions kind of quickly here, hopefully, and then button this thing up. All right, from Gabriel. Is there a chance of Reykjanes's activity lasting for decades, having more voluminous eruptions? So could we have bigger, larger volume eruptions than what we've seen? Absolutely. I think right now with this little system, we'd expect it to do what it's been doing the last 3 times. But could we see a change in behavior or a change in location at some point in the future where we see larger volume eruptions? Absolutely. I think that's very likely. From Bill again, is that series of volcanic ridges older to the east and younger to the west due to spreading at the mid-ocean ridge? That series of volcanic ridges, I don't know. Oh, maybe he's talking about in here. Series of volcanic ridges. I don't know if he's talking about in the ocean or here on the peninsula. So, sorry, Bill, I didn't quite totally understand that one. Mr. Muppet Fan, did the lava from the 2021 to 23 eruptions come from the same magma chamber as the recent event? So that would be these 3 eruptive vents over. So there's the 3 we had most recently, but then there were these. And I don't have these lava fields mapped out, but you can kind of see them, right? Except this one's not on the Google Earth yet. They did come from the same source, but they were fed by 2 separate shallow magma chambers, if that makes sense. So imagine something deeper down that's the main supply, but then that's feeding a shallower magma body that's underneath these vents. That's the way I understand it. Derek Schick, would be great to see a cross-sectional view east to west showing the different volcanic systems. That would be cool. I just don't know if we have, I mean, it could be drawn, but it would be somewhat fantasy land, but maybe it would be okay just to sort of conceptually draw those, but we don't know exactly where those are. Oh, the different volcanic systems. Yeah, you could do that. We've seen it in map view. If you wanted a cross-section view with like magma chambers and conduits, that would just be very, that would be very interpretive. We don't know exactly where those are. From D. Adobagu, troubleshoot my math, please. Oh boy. Watching August Gudmundsson's videos, Reykjavik area volcanoes are about 2 plus or minus years old, spreading rate 2 to 5 millimeters per year. Did they form at the spreading zone, much like the current episode? I'm not sure where. I can't check your math because I can't really follow what that question's asking. So I apologize. And I get that you guys are limited with your questions in the live chat to, X number of characters. So sometimes it's hard to get it all in. Nicholas, greetings from Germany. How is this system connected to the faults at Thingvellir? So if you follow these volcanic systems across Iceland, here's the Grindavik system, here's the capital area. This is the Brennensteinfeld system. I think that's the right name. I probably butchered it. And then over here we get to the Thingvellir system. So this is a big lake. This is where the national park is. And this is another area that has volcanic vents that trend northeast southwest. There's also these large fractures and cracks in the ground. Let's see if that's going to get, there we go. This is where the national park is. So it's all related tectonically, but it's probably not related volcanically, but it's the same series of tectonic forces that are creating these, but they're separate segments or separate systems, if you will. All right, a little bit more. We can do this. Power through. Mantle wind. Why do we differentiate between magma and lava? Do they behave differently? That's a great question. So magma is the name we give to molten rock that is below the surface, and lava is the name we give to molten rock at the surface. Seems like it should be the same thing, but here's an important difference. Magma has trapped dissolved gases in it. When lava gets to the surface, it largely releases a lot of those gases. So there is a little bit of a difference in terms of composition. Magma has trapped gases because it's below ground, whereas lava has gases that are escaping. So it's a little bit different. Great question. I like that one. Larry Rowe, after each eruption, the ground falls back to a level higher than it was previously. Is this due to lava remaining in the system or ground just deformed and stretched? Good question. I'm not sure. It could be a little bit of both. It could be that after each eruption, you're not erupting all the magma in the system. You're just erupting the pressurized material that can easily move through the conduits to the surface. And so it's probably largely that, and a lesser factor would be the elasticity and the ductile behavior of the heated crust after each time. From Anne Umphrey, does Iceland have subsidence due to weight of the volcanic material as is noted in Hawaii? That's a good question. I've never read or seen anything about that, so I don't know for sure. It just occurred to me that you guys can't see the questions, so I could put those up here. So we're on Anne's question. And I don't know. That's a good question. I would guess that the way that it definitely has to have some subsidence. And it has the ice on it too, so you have glaciers. So there has to be some subsidence. I just haven't seen a lot of information or studies about that. So, and you could definitely get some of the earthquakes in Iceland that are due to just that load of rock, right, sitting on the difference though too is you have the plate boundary, so you have more of that asthenosphere rising up. So maybe it's not subsiding as much as Hawaii because of that factor. I'll have to think about that. It's a good one. S. Nichols, what percent sea and land is of volcanic origin? Fair to say 70 to 80%. Well, the entire ocean floor ocean crust is all volcanic. Sitting on top of that is sediment and fish poop and mud and muck, but the entire ocean floor that's ocean crust is volcanic in origin. On land, it depends on how you want to quantify it. If you're talking about from looking at the ground, then it's a very small percentage because most of the land surface is sediments or sedimentary rocks. But if you want to look at the volume, the thickness, cross-sectional view, it would be much higher than that. Regis, Moncton, what are some good books for learning about connection between volcanic activity and metallurgy? I don't know any off the top of my head. Yeah, sorry about that. None that come to mind. Catherine Clark, Scaremongers cite repeated rise and fall of the crust makes it brittle and results in eruptions away from fissures and quake areas, including potential eruption in the Blue Lagoon. Any veracity there? Um, yeah, rise and fall of the crust makes it brittle. Not really, not at depth because it's behaving more elastically at depth, but and results in eruptions away from fissures. Oh, so yeah, for whatever reason, even though the magma body is underneath the Blue Lagoon and the power plant, we just don't expect any eruption there anytime soon because the fractures aren't connected well enough. Maybe the rocks are a little bit more dense there. In other episodes, I've talked about all the different variables that go into um, rock composition and how robust rocks can be based on their density, gas bubbles, fractures, how connected are the fractures, did the lava erupt as subglacial material and it's pillow lavas, is it hyaloclastite, which is more fragmented. There's just so many different types of rock, even though it's all basalt, there's so many different types and textures that I think that those are some of the variables there. Gary Robertson, are you aware of a geocache that are called Earth Cache? Yeah, I've heard of those. I think it's geocaching where you go and you learn about, so it's not like a little trinket you collect, but you actually learn about a specific site that has cool geologic context. I think that's what it is. Ian Suzuki, do we have a good sense of an upper and lower bound of how much longer this series of eruptions will last? What we can go on is what we've seen in the past, and in the past we've seen some of these eruptive phases have lasted hundreds of years. That doesn't mean they erupt continuously for hundreds of years, but the starting and the end point lasts hundreds of years. And so this could be a very long-lived period of unrest in the Reykjanes Peninsula. And finally, whew, I'm exhausted. The very last question from Tim Pointing. Another YouTube channel is talking about a transgressive sill heading upwards towards Grindavik, based it seems on the earthquakes getting shallower on a line towards Grindavik. I haven't heard anything about that. A transgressive sill, that's some weird terminology. Yeah, even in the world of volcanoes, I've never heard that term used, but I'm interested to learn what it's about. So, yeah, feel free to share that with me or whatever you want to do there. Okay, I think I got through it all. So how are we doing, mods? I'm just now looking at the live chat after several hours of talking and answering questions and showing things. But hopefully that was helpful. It looks like we still have close to about 1,800 people here, so that's great. And maybe some of you have answered the questions better than I did, which is fine. Remember, we're a team. It's a community. We're all here learning together. I do not claim to be the de facto expert. There's a lot of things I don't know about, a lot of things I have questions, and so appreciate anyone who's in here that's also helping to answer questions with good, straight up science. So good work, team. It's been about 2 hours. I think that's good enough for me. What's next will be, I'll be gone this weekend, but I have a video from Southern California that I'll upload. I'll try to get some videos done while I'm down near Bryce. There's a couple of really cool stories down there. It'll kind of depend on how much snow's on the ground and what I can access, but for sure I can do a couple there. Hoping to do a random road cut while we're down there as well. So hopefully that's something you can look forward to. In terms of Iceland and maybe even Kilauea information. Sorry, I'm just looking at my calendar here. Yeah, Monday we'll be getting back. Tuesday's a full day for me. I have my climbing class I take outside. So yeah, maybe Wednesday or Friday of next week we might be able to do another one of these. We'll see if the mods are available. Remember to please like the live stream, share it with folks. I'll put some information in the video description if you want to. Oh, someone says that transgressive sill was the Dr. Astro Geo guy. Shoot, I don't want to talk ill of anyone else's YouTube channel, but suffice it to say, I don't know much about this individual. I don't know if they are truly a doctor in either astro or geo, whatever that means. And I've watched a few of this person's videos, and what do I want to say? Haven't been very convincing to me. I didn't feel like it had a lot of good scientific content. It felt like a lot of flashy scientific diagrams without context and explanation, and I'll leave it at that. So, but YouTube's a crazy world, and it's all out there for you. Yeah, so we can maybe do another live stream. Yeah, maybe next week, or for sure that last week in February. That may be close to when we see potentially another eruption. I will get back with Johan, and there's a small chance, I'm not making any promises, that maybe early tomorrow morning my time, we might be able to do a flight in northern Iceland. That sounds kind of fun. So as I'm thinking about it, I'm talking myself into it a little bit more, especially if Johan kind of, I can fly the drone, but if he could provide a little bit more commentary and background, since I'm not as familiar with that area, that would be pretty awesome. So I'll get back to him. So you might see that tomorrow, a live stream drone flight tomorrow might be happening. Just kind of look to my YouTube page here to see if there's any announcements that pop up. And yeah, thanks again to Susan and Lisa and Amanda Joe for doing the yeoman's work there and doing the heavy lifting on the live chat and organizing the questions and everything else. I do try to go back after the fact and read through the live chat to see if there's anything I missed or maybe a good link that someone shared that would be helpful. So I'll try to do that as well. Thanks all you great viewers and part of the team out there for joining me today, for your continued support, for your encouragement, motivation. If you've emailed me and I haven't got back to you, just realize there's a lot coming at me, and I try to get back to as many as I can. If you're interested in one of the field trips, you can send an email to my Gmail account, and I will get back to you at some point in the next week or so with some more information, and hope to meet some of you that way. Otherwise, we'll go ahead and sign off for now from southern Idaho, where I am, but we'll say goodbye to Iceland, which was sort of the focus of our discussion here. But please also look for some of my other videos. I know maybe they're not as exciting as Iceland, or you don't have the context, but anytime you can engage in learning, especially these field-based videos, I think really are a good way to learn more about geology and how the Earth works. And even though it might not be a place you know, let's say I've got a video in Nevada or something like that, rocks are rocks and geology is geology, and you might be able to apply some of that knowledge towards an area closer to you or an area that you know and like to visit. So with that, we'll go ahead and sign off. Anything else from the mods? Yeah, remember to like before you go. Lots of good information there. Thanks again to Amanda Joe for the content she provided. Thanks to Bruce Garner for those excellent earthquake animations. That was, I think, a big hit, at least for me. I'll see what folks have to say. And we will see you next time. Take care, be well, and have a good one, team.